Street Pastor. My name is Mark Knight, and I am the Director of Operations and Senior Account Manager over at I Help Pastors Get Jobs. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what's my next steps in ministry. And I'm thankful that you downloaded this resource. I'm sure that's one of the questions. One of the reasons you downloaded is because you're wondering, what is my next step in ministry? And I talk to lots of pastors all the time on the phone. And that's really kind of a question that they have. As pastors, we felt called, we feel gifted, we feel equipped, we feel empowered to do ministry, and maybe it's hard. I know it's hard to sort of go like, well, can I keep doing that? Can I keep doing ministry? Is there even next steps in ministry? What does ministry look like down the road? And maybe you're not quite at that place yet. You do need a break. You do need time off. You need something in between. Or maybe you're just still like so burned out that you're like, I'm not even sure there's anything for me in ministry in the future. But I do want to offer you some hope. We've helped hundreds of pastors, and many of them have been able to continue to operate in ministry. Not all of them are obviously going into bivocational or co-vocational. Some are just volunteering at a church. Some are just attending with their families on Sundays and maybe an usher or a greeter. Or some have been able to continue to do smaller ministries, and that's all been their choice. And that's where we're kind of getting to, is they've been able to choose to do ministry, and they've been able to continue to do ministry without all the pressure of the offering plates passing on Sunday and how much is going to be in it. Am I going to have enough salary or all that kind of stuff? And so I want to explore that today. What's my next step in ministry? Well, first we have to kind of determine what category do you fall into? The first category I see is thinking about leaving ministry. Like, I'm not sure, I might want to go. Maybe I'm burned out, I'm exhausted, as there's been a lot to put on my plate, and like it's time to go. Others are in that same category, or maybe going, I don't make enough money, I don't get enough benefits, I have no pension. Someday down the road, when I retire, I'm not going to have anything. There's going to be nothing going for me, especially with all the uncertainty with Social Security, and are there going to be generations that don't get any Social Security, and all that stuff is part of that. And so you're like thinking like, man, for the betterment of my family, for the betterment of myself, like for the betterment of my future, I might have to leave ministry. Or maybe you're thinking about leaving ministry because you're working through some toxic church stuff. Like maybe there's this big problem between you and the board, or you're struggling with relational strain in your staff, or maybe there's just a specific family in your church that seems to dominate, and it's just like, I just want to get out of this place, and it's just like, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I went to school for. This is toxic people running toxic places, and I don't want to be part of it. And so that's like, I'm thinking about ministry or leaving in ministry, right? I'm thinking about like, it's got to be done. And so that'd be one category. Another category is maybe I've been let go, and I'm not sure I want to start over. I'm not sure I want to find another place. Maybe you're like, man, I love where we live. I don't want to move. My kids are settled in school. My wife has a great job, or maybe just a good friend group or whatever. And you're like, I'm not really sure I want to move. And obviously, with ministry, like typically you can't just get a new job up the street. You got to move. You got to go somewhere else. You got to go to another city, at least, if not another state. And so you're like, I don't know, man. I've been let go, and I'm not sure if I want to keep doing ministry because I like where we're at, or I'm just not interested in starting over, or maybe it's just time for me to be done. That would be another category. The third category is I want ministry to look different. Like this isn't the way ministry should look. My church is spending 70% of their budget towards staff or whatever, and you're just like, it's not the way I saw it. It's not. And so maybe you're thinking like, I want to do bivo or co-vocational. Like, I want to be a bivocational pastor. I want to be a co-vocational pastor. And we have another pathway for that. So if you're already at this point in the video and that's you, go click that other pathway. We want to help guide you and have you look at what it looks like to become bivo or covo. But if not, maybe you're like, I just want ministry to look different, be a volunteer. I don't need to do this as a full-time thing. I don't even need to do this as a part-time thing. Like, I just want to like help people, and I just want to love people where they're at. I would love just attending church with my family and greeting at the door or whatever. And those are kind of where you're at, and based on kind of where you find yourself at, and this is what I would challenge you to do, is sit down and write out, like, where am I at, like, where am I currently at, and then where do I see myself in the next 3 to 5 years, and what does that look like for ministry, right? What does that look like for ministry? Because that will help you and help us determine sort of what you're looking at. There are some pastors that truly just need to push through, make up to your chairman, get denominational support. But there are others that it's clear that God is calling you to something new and into a different season. And that's great. And that's crazy. And I always say, like, it's better to leave a year too early than a year too late. Pastors this is the ones that make the news are the ones that waited too long. They burned themselves out. And of course there are some that are just purely evil, and they're just preying on people. But I believe there's a lot of pastors that make terrible decisions and moral failures because they've just stayed too long in ministry, and their hearts have been exhausted to the point where they just don't have the safeguards they needed anymore. So it's better to leave a year too early than a year too late. If you're feeling burned out, you're feeling beat up, like, it might be time to go. And so each of these, so where you are and where you want to go, will provide different questions and different answers that we can help navigate you through. And in a discovery call, we can even look at some of these things. But mostly, you're probably trying to understand what else you could do. Maybe like, okay, I get it, Mark. I can do other ministry tasks. I can do volunteer. I can maybe do part-time. I could just lead a Bible study or whatever. Like, you're seeing that. Maybe you're getting that. And you're like, what else can I do? And that would be, one of the other videos that we got on this pathway, that it's like, what else can I do? And look into that too, because there are jobs out there that you can immediately find an on-ramp for. But I want to help you decide what's next for ministry. And I want you to know there are options. You can simply, like I said, step into a volunteer role. You could get into a Kovo role. You can have a season where you aren't doing anything in ministry, where you and your family just attend church. You can heal and you can rest, you can recover, whatever God has for you in this next season. And the biggest barriers for us is coming to terms with this. And I feel like this is part of why we click on this video, and this is part of why you download it. It's not just what's next for ministry, it's the grief associated with letting it go. Letting it go. It's hard to let a dream die, but it's even harder to let vocational ministry sort of dissipate, because, a lot of us were called when we were young, or we had a real turning point, and we just really feel like, did I fail God? Did I fail my church? Did I fail my family? Did I fail my calling? And this is hard for us to let go. Vocational grief, right, is big, and ironically, this is a unique to the Western world. This is unique to us Westerners, because in most of the world, like, bivocational and co-vocational and volunteer ministry and royal priesthood of all believers is very common in the minority cultures. But in the Western world, we're very obsessed with seeing a full-time income based on our vocational, and that's the only way you're successful in your calling. But that's not what God has for you. Maybe in this next season, God has something new for you. God has something amazing for you. God has a pathway forward for you where you can operate with your giftings and your callings, and yet at the same time not be tied down to whether or not the offering going by is going to be enough to feed your family next week, or pay for the car that needs some maintenance, or whatever. Like, what if you just thought differently about your calling? And what does it look like to walk through that vocational grief? Because one of the things we also believe here is that vocational grief leads to vocational freedom. And that's hard. You have to kind of walk through some of that vocational grief to find vocational freedom. But when you do, and we've seen it with hundreds of pastors, when you do, it's life-changing. It's amazing. And so maybe your next step in ministry needs to be determined, but you're going to have to kind of start with where you're at and where you want to be. And what does that look like? And then put it before God, because it seems like you're here because God may be already working on something in your heart. And so continue down this pathway, schedule a discovery call. I'd love to talk to you more about what it looks like to make these next steps and to get into this place where you can have a little bit of vocational freedom, and God can continue to use you in ministry in ways that you didn't think was possible because you were so hitched to a full-time salary. God bless.